Hello and welcome back to All Things Money. I'm your host for the show, David Blain. We thank you for joining us. During this segment, we're going to continue talking a little bit about the bailout and subsequent repayment of the auto loan industries from the recession. Most of my facts for this come from a Washington Post article that was dated, I think it was by Glenn Chysler back on the 7th of June. And he's talking about this speech by President Obama. Once again, this is not about President Obama. He didn't write this speech. Some speechwriter wrote it, and the speechwriter got the data from, the economic advisors and the Treasury Department, and it's so convoluted. He's just up there giving the speech. But my point in this is not to impugn the deliverer of the speech, but it's to point out the problems in relying on government statistics to make your investment decisions. So, without further ado, let's get back into it. The Washington Post asserts that this was one of the most misleading collections of assertions they've seen. And so, the first one is, quote, Chrysler's repaid every dime and more of what it owes American taxpayers for their support during my presidency. And that's going to be important here in a minute. And repaid that money 6 years ahead of schedule. And this week we reached a deal to sell our remaining stake. That means soon Chrysler will be at 100% in private hands. So, wow, that sounds like a great deal. I mean, that not only did they pay back what they borrowed, but they paid it back with interest, and the taxpayers made money on this deal. What a great deal. Well, I have to say I was a little disappointed in the president for this because he snuck in that phrase, during my presidency. And if you recall, during the last month of President George Bush's presidency, Chrysler was loaned $4 billion. And at the time, everyone knew that Obama was going to become president, and there was a lot of collaboration between the two presidents and their staff. So it's not like he didn't know what was going on. So the point is that if you count the $4 billion that was loaned under the Bush administration, Chrysler will not pay back everything that has been owed to the American taxpayers. Yes, they're paying back the money that was given to them under Obama's presidency, but it conveniently excludes the $4 billion that had been loaned to them 1 month before he became president. Even the Treasury Department, if you listen to the Treasury Department, they admit that they're about $1.3 billion short in repayment. And the White House, says that they're justified in not counting it because, it wasn't his presidency. I think that's ridiculous to say that they're paying back 100% and more of the money when in reality they're going to end up paying about 90% of what was borrowed from the government. As a taxpayer, we don't care which president loaned it to them. The taxpayer, we want our money back. And the fact of the matter is that it was a total, the total money loaned to Chrysler, they're not going to get it all back. So the other thing that is 100% private ownership, frankly, I don't consider the 46% stake owned by the United Auto Workers in private hands. And that's where it will end up, is 46% owned by the United Auto Workers. So once again, you got to be careful with statistics and things like that when making your investment decisions. One thing, all three American automakers now adding shifts and creating jobs at the strongest rate since the 1990s. Once again, this is one that goes to the inside information. The White House says that the data to back this claim concerning the big three automakers is not public information, which means either they're making it up or it is in fact true, but it's not public information. As you may or may not know, trading based on non-public information is illegal. Just ask Martha Stewart or any of these other people on trial on Wall Street. And so the White House is making these statements based on inside information, which what I want you to think is not necessarily whether that's right or wrong, but someone in the White House is getting inside information. And this ties into our comments last week about congressmen and how they outperform the market. So there is non-public information flowing through the government. The next statement, GM plans to hire back all the workers they laid off during the recession. Once again, if you look at the phrase during the recession, okay, it's quite close to being true, but since nearly 2006, General Motors has laid off nearly 68,000 hourly and salaried workers, and of course, there's no way that they're hiring anywhere near those numbers back as a result of the government bailout. So, in the year before I was president, says President Obama, the industry lost more than 400,000 jobs. Companies stood on the brink of collapse. We could have done what a lot of folks in Washington thought we should do, which was nothing. Once again, this is from the Washington Post, and they're flat out saying, look, that's just not true. There was a lot of debate about the correct way to help the auto industry. And on Monday, the Wall Street Journal published from David Skeel, a law professor at the University of Pennsylvania, who says, quote, to claim that the car companies would have collapsed if the government hadn't intervened in the way it did is to suggest the intervention came at very little cost is a dangerous misreading of our recent history. So once again, you have some very tenuous, possibly flat-out lies, but certainly misleading statistics coming out of the government. And we don't want you to just rely on those when you're making your investment decisions. Well, we're coming up on the next break here. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit about some real estate topics. So for All Things Money, my name is David Blain, and we'll be right back after a few short messages.